I'm Melissa Hilliard-Potter, one of the co-curators.
I'm Nisa Paige Lieberman, a co-curator of Revolution at Point Zero, and with Mel, co-organizer of our symposium today.
So the Revolution at Point Zero exhibition was a brainchild that started a number of years ago. It is a response to the underrepresentation of the feminist art legacy in contemporary socially engaged art. And so the project that we're working on is part of a long-term exhibition and research focus, which includes this exhibition. We're hoping for a larger scale exhibition as well, and once this show comes down on Monday, we're turning our focus to a catalog and hopefully a manifesto. So your input today and participation in our workshops is critical in building this collective vision around what a feminist social practice is. We have a handout for all of you. The program today indicates how the day is going to go, which is that we have Dean Anya Isuzu, who's going to present Project Tool to open us up, followed by 15-minute presentations, which are also going to take place in this room. The introductions to all of our incredible speakers today are in the program. We're then going to have a short coffee break, and we are going to then transition to 3 pretty incredible workshops for the afternoon. After that, we will transition to an opening reception, a closing reception, in fact, between 4 and 6 in the gallery. There are so many people to thank, as any event like this requires, and we want to direct your attention to the program where most of the thank yous are. But in particular, I'm not sure Sydney Pacha is with us right now. She may still be downstairs. We want to pay particular attention and give many, many thanks to Sydney Pacha, a student here at Columbia College, without whom none of this would have been possible. And then finally, we are technically oversold, and so the workshops could potentially be standing room only, hoping that's not the case. But we will be transitioning out to the south side of this floor into 3 breakouts. Is anything else I didn't cover there?
You did such a beautiful job, Melissa Hilliard-Potter. Thank you.
I
have just a couple more notes before we get started with our presentations. As Mel said, right after this, there's going to be a reception downstairs in the gallery. So if you haven't had a chance yet to see Revolution at Point Zero, you will have a chance. And we're excited to be joined by Marissa John with her Care Force mobile outside. There's Marissa. Hi, I haven't seen you yet. I just saw her pulling her car in front of the gallery. You might have seen that, and you might have wanted to take it home for yourself. And we're also going to have a presentation by Megan Young and Angela Davis-Fagan, esteemed alum of Columbia College. So they're going to be talking about their project, The Longest Walk, that's on display downstairs. This is an open engagement program. That's probably where many of you found us in their catalog. And we have more events going on all weekend. So tomorrow and Sunday, Megan and Angela are going to be doing their Longest Walk performances Saturday and Sunday at Open Engagement on the UIC campus. Marissa is going to be unveiling her newest performance, choreographed with local domestic care workers. That is on Sunday afternoon. She's also doing a keynote tomorrow night at Open Engagement. And Saturday, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, I think Mel and I are leading another conversation to define what is a feminist social practice. I think there's room for 50 people. I don't know if that's booked yet, but that's going to be happening tomorrow if you want to come contribute to our manifesto. So everything today is being documented. We have Carrie Ruckel here from CAN TV. That's who is by the camera back there. So if you are in this room, there's a good chance that you will be on television. If you are uncomfortable with that, there's nothing I can do, but you may leave. So if that's not your game, I apologize. You would have to leave because you might be on TV. We also have Phil Work filming documentation for us as well throughout the day, and Lindsay Higgins, our current student, doing photography. So we're capturing all of this documentation for a number of reasons. We did get a grant to support today's program and the larger Revolution at Point Zero program, and we will use this documentation to go for more funding so that we can travel the exhibition, so that we can do a catalog, so that we can do Mel's manifesto, which is her dream in life. And I think that's pretty much it. So thank you for coming. Welcome to Columbia College Chicago. We're really happy to have you here. And we're so excited to present our artists, friends, collaborators, activists, troublemakers, coming up now, starting with Anya Isuzu. Thank you.
We need to do the just open. Hey, Nisa, how do we go from this to... Okay, hold on.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? You there? How's everybody doing? I need a little love before I can start doing these things, you know? So, my name's Anya Isuzu, and I'm so grateful that I was invited and had an opportunity to walk through the gallery downstairs this week, and had a one-on-one conversation with Mel, and got a chance to sit with the work and consider my invitation to present some work that I'm just in the very beginning stages of, in the context of the brilliant work that's on display downstairs. I think the piece that resonated for me as familiar or in conversation or in the world with the work of Project Tool was the choreography with the what do you call them? The tractors. Are they tractors? Yeah. What is her name, the choreographer's name? Yes, Marilater Menukeles. Did I say that right? Ukeles, yes, beautiful. And I remember myself as a young person sort of watching and participating in a lot of work. I lived back and forth across 2 continents, and had occasion to work with farming tools and building tools, and worked a lot and played a lot of sports and was trained a lot, and then grew up working in restaurants. And I just remember, you know, sort of watching the movement of people that knew how to wield their tools well, and how beautiful and full of harmony and sensitivity and efficiency and grace the movement of a mechanic sliding, you know, from underneath a car, or a dishwasher in a busy restaurant. And remember always being sort of caught and fascinated by the use of weight and knowledge and body, and the sort of dance that would happen between the body and the tool. So my name is Anya Isuzu. I also, in my other alter ego, serve as the Dean of the School of Fine and Performing Arts, so I'm kind of like trying to land in the moment in my artist body. I'm the artistic director and a performer builder for Project Tool. Steve Silber is a floor designer, collaborator of mine, who designed the floors that Project Tool will leave behind it. Kiara Collins, a dancer, Anna Martine Whitehead, also a dancer. Damon Lux is a local sound composer / performer who will be working with us, and Petra Probstner, a member of the design department here at Columbia College, is an interior architect. So this is just a little bit about where Project Tool is right now, and then I'm going to kind of rewind us back. This video is on the site of a website here in Chicago of an organization called 3 Arts that is currently hosting Project Tool as a supported campaign. So they produced and made this little short video that will give you a little information about what we are up to. My name's Anya Isuzu, and my project is called Project Tool. I'm making a dance, and the byproduct of the dance is going to be a stack of hexagonal sprung wood dance floors. In my studies of dance and culture, I became acutely aware of the floor in the Western context being this tool that we depend on and need and use. The relationship between tools and dancing is really ancient. In just my lifetime, the incredible speed with which we've discarded tools and picked up new ones and discarded and picked up new ones. Through sequences of movement action, we actually stimulate the brain to grow, to develop new synapses and new connections. Are we even like stimulating the movement patterns anymore that we need to stimulate in order to use this tool that we're outfitted with physically? I definitely prioritize the body. So I put the body into a situation, I map out an experience, and then what I'm going to do with that, I'm going to let the body tell me back. I've been invited to be in residence at Rebuild Foundation. I'm imagining that over the course of the year, our building sessions slowly become more and more performative. The building is always a part of the performance, and the product of the project, the floors, become the platform for the dance parts of the performance. So far, we have a really amazing design, and we've built an initial prototype. We're in the midst of our second week-long intensive of training the mover, dancer, researchers to fabricate the design of these hexagonal sprung wood dance floors that fit into one another. What we need is support in order to buy the materials that we need, the tools that we need in order to make those floors a physical reality. I want to give dancers this super foundational, salt of the earth, literal foundation to your form. This doesn't have to be a mystery. You don't have to float around town and go into spaces where people are asking you to perform and look at a concrete floor and your knees ache just thinking about it. It becomes a place in the future where all the dancers and the dance companies that have been a part of the process of building these floors can check them out like you check a book out of the library, When you contribute to this project, you become a part of these floors becoming a part of the city of Chicago's cultural and performative landscape. You're giving us the tools that we need to bring dance all over the city, really. I'm a dancer. Project Tool is a choreographic process. It's been difficult because we are using the building of the floors as our movement research. So we learn how to build floors, we get the materials, we get the money we need to buy the materials, we get the design, we figure out how to understand the design, we get together, we figure out how to use the tools, we get certified to use the tools on the 10th floor of the fabrication facility. It's hard not to think that we're becoming carpenters, but I have to keep reminding us all, we're dancers, this is a dance, we're making a dance. And some of that is people laugh, as we go through these meetings that are really more about construction than dancing. And I keep reminding people, we're just using this as an improvisational score to get in touch with what it feels like to use these tools. What does it feel like for a dancer with our hyper-aware sensitivity to technique, to placement, to what it feels like to repeat a certain action over and over, to understand and when we do that action wrong, how it hurts up in the crick of your neck a certain way at the end of the day because you've done it over and over again in a way that's out of alignment with your core. We're interested in that. We're harvesting information from that practice, and what we're making is a dance that will leave behind it a bunch of hardwood dance floors. So it's a dance about tools and the body through time in dance. That sign was something that I walked by at Home Depot as we were searching for wood for some aspect of the project, and I thought I needed to grab onto that. So as a dancer and as a dance educator, I've for many, many years danced many traditional forms of dance, mostly from West Africa and from the African diaspora. And I've also taught dance and culture. And during the course of that time, I kind of got attached a little bit to the structuralist theories of Alan Lomax, who kind of looks at dance through history and looks at the ways traditional cultures eked out a survival in their natural environment, what kind of tools, literally, they used, how they divided labor between males and females, and then compared the movements that they did with their tools with the movements that have been sort of hallowed by the ways that they have preserved traditional movements in their dance forms. So in cultures, for instance, where people lived closer to the equator, where women were able to have babies, tie their babies on their back, go back out into the world and continue to produce food. In warm climates, women traditionally produce about 80% of the food. Dances tend to be very poly unit in the use of the torso. So the torso moves, the hips move off center from the rib cage. There's a lot of movement that we now associate as quote unquote female, though it's not necessarily true that it's female. It has to do with the way labor tended to be distributed across gender. But you will also find closer to the equator that men also tend to dance with a little bit more polycentric movement in the torso. Whereas in arenas where it's colder, where most of the food was garnered through either hunting, where a hunter would need to hold the torso of the body rather still and pull back, for instance, the bow of an arrow and really be able to sort of aim it, or in Alaska where a hunter would stand hunched over a fishing hole for hours and would need to be able to, with accuracy, send a spear into potential dinner. The carriage of the torso is very solid, single unit. The spine is held as one single erect line, right? Not necessarily masculine or feminine, but indicating the division of labor and the technical requirements of the tools that were asserting the community's survival at the time. So I started to be interested in the fact that our dances were sort of this blueprint, if you will, of our ancestors' relationship, not only necessarily to one another or to their belief systems, but also to this fundamental relationship to the tools that they used and the way tools sort of extend the schema of the brain, right? And extend our capacity to interact with our environment in the way that this is currently not a tool that I'm very familiar with, but a tool that both of these things are tools that are sort of extending my capacity in the room right now. I started thinking about how my participation in dances, traditional dances, dances that were maybe 700 years old, and as in the case of West African dances, was actually connecting me back to movement patterns that was also connecting me back to the movement patterns of some of my genetic ancestors. And then I started thinking about genetics and how movement impacts the brain and how the brain actually develops generation to generation based on movement. And if we use the same tools generation after generation and the same movements impact the brain to develop in similar ways, that somehow our movements, our interaction with tools, are a weaving that literally connects us to the ways of being of our ancestors. My ancestors were farmers and carpenters. On my father's side, I'm an Igbo from southeastern Nigeria, and I'm sorry, this picture was the best correlate, but it's very dark. But if you can see the silhouette of a Mennonite woman on a farm in southeastern Ohio. My mother's family was from northeastern, she always corrects me, the tri-state area. Mennonite, also farming community. So the farmer on the right is using a hoe in a way that's traditional of West African cultures, where the body is bent, leaned over. Usually the handle is, a lot of them are even shorter than that, so the body has to stay very close to the earth. And as you can see, the long-handled hoe of the German farmer allows the body to stand much more erect. I grew up back and forth between Ohio and Nigeria. So in my formative years, as I was growing up, I participated in both of these types of farming. On my father's side, my grandfather was a carpenter. I don't have any images of carpentry from that side, but on my mother's side, my mother is a Souder. The Souders are known for bringing put-it-together furniture to the United States. They were the first ones that sort of brought that technology out. It was inherently an upcycling process. Mennonites are known for doing more with less. It's sort of like a tenet of the Mennonite religion. And he started repurposing wood chips from the wood pile and created a particle board methodology of making fabricated wood that could be used, that could be sent to your home and you could put together your own furniture. the predecessor to IKEA, I suppose. My great-great-uncle started that company. But the dance is also really about the body, right? So I'm interested in the relationship with tools. I'm interested in my ancestors' relationship with tools, but I'm also interested in what might be happening to my body now as I live in a society where technological innovation changes the way we interact with tools in an ever-increasing, almost dizzying pace. So what does it mean that I have a body so closely genetically related to farmers and carpenters, but I'm doing with that tool what I do on a day-to-day basis now? What am I allowing to atrophy? My body is still genetically sort of created, composed to go out and spend however many hours on a farm, right? I'm directly descendant from people that did that for generations and generations, but I spend most of my day pressing buttons lightly with my fingertips. I'm lucky that I'm a dancer, right? So I have that opportunity to re-stimulate those patterns in the context of the dances that I practice, to re-stimulate them in a more physically complex way than I would if I was, just hitting the gym, hitting the keyboard, hitting the gym, hitting the keyboard, like most of us are doing. And then, so I just asked myself the question, what are we leaving out? And how is it affecting our brain? How is the capacity of my brain being stimulated or not stimulated because I'm not stimulating the movement patterns that created the people that created me, genetically speaking? Am I reaching my potential? So, yeah, the Chalitna Lodge is one of my collaborators who you saw in the beginning video, who was in the pictures with the floor, with the clamps and the hat on, and you know who I'm talking about? Okay, good. Steve Silber is the owner and of this place in Alaska, Chalitna Lodge. Maybe I'll play a little bit of it. A couple years ago, I had a residency. They showed some of it in the video that you already saw, but this, it's gonna play, but it's not gonna go. You saw some of it in the video already. I'm not gonna take our time to go there, but while at Chalitna was the place where you saw that I buried myself in the ground. While there is when I first started sort of physically investigating this process of instead of putting my body into a dance rehearsal, instead of putting my body into sort of practicing dance movements over and over again, I would just put my body to work and use the actions of work as the warm-up, if you will, or the training, the movement training, to lay the groundwork for what the performance would become. And so the basic premise of Project Tool is that we build these floors, and we come together, we build the floors, we cut our time in half, we spend half our time building, and then we move to a studio that's right next to the wood shop, and we spend the rest of the time improvising. We have a sound designer who's gonna come and capture the sounds of what we're doing. We have a videographer, both still and motion, image, who's gonna come and capture images from what we're doing, and then every time we come together, we layer that information back on. So the movement information, as we start to get better and better at understanding what it means to use our tools, and we're gonna use legacy tools, not digital printers or computer fabricated processes. We're gonna use hammers and saws and sand things by hand. And every time we come back together, images will be projected, sound will be projected into the space that multiplies the sounds that are live, and we will go from building to improvising to building to improvising. And I'm imagining that over time, we literally build the floors underneath us, and we begin to dance on the floors that we've built. So it's about the body, it's about tools, it's about genetics, it's about ancestors, but it's also about the community that I live in right now. So we're planning to, at particular times during the process, invite the local dance community, whoever wants to come and help us with certain aspects of the project where we need a lot of hands. We got 8 floors, they all need to be sanded, we're doing it by hand, let's get 16 people in the room, let's get it done. So it's sort of like a barn raising, if you will, something that definitely comes out of my Mennonite background. At Rebuild Foundation, which is down on the south side of Chicago, Theaster Gates organization, very much also focused on this idea of building, of repurposing. We will be in residency all year, and Theaster's space is a space that holds lots and lots and lots of archives. And so they have volunteered to become an archive for these hexagonal dance floor pieces. So the idea is that dance companies that come and help us, people that put their hands on and contribute to the process, can carve their name in the back of a floor and show up next year or the year after and check a floor out of the library, take it somewhere in the city where they're doing a performance, put their floor down, and have the tool, which is kind of the tool of what we need as contemporary dancers to be able to dance safely in environments. So it gives dancers, for long after the project, sort of access, a literal platform for us to bring our work around the city. And so, I'm imagining that the piece or the project will have some socioeconomic and political impact on the city and the performance community that I'm a part of. And then during the process, we're hoping to bring in responders. So someone might come in who's an expert, for instance, on schematics and the brain and the intersection between the brain and movement, or another person who is a Laban scholar, or somebody that focuses on Alan Lomax. Architecture responders might come in to sit, to watch a session, building/performance session, and then to respond to that session. That person's participation is recorded and then layers on to the archive of what the project is and becomes a part of future performances. I say performances because I'm not sure if there'll be performances, if there'll be installations, if there'll become more performances as they go on. We'll see. And then I think the last component about it, which is the other part that I feel sort of more in my gut as an individual artist, is about leaving. And it's the part that I'm most pre-verbal about, I think. It's the part that has something to do with me being a mother. It's having children that are young still, and what's happened in the last, forever. But just in the last 2 years in my immediate environment, it started to progress so quickly that it's hard to say, well, it was that moment when my son watched Eric Gardner on CNN get choked, or it was that moment, when the election results came in, or it was that moment when we all heard what happened in Paris, or, it's hard to, it's all sort of becoming sort of like a continuum. And I think that there's a certain kind of something that feels like rage that I'm not willing to give lip service to. And so there's an image that I want to have. I see my body standing in this vault that's at the bottom of the Stony Island Arts Bank, with the tools that I've learned to use hanging around my neck like a necklace. I just want to be in that. I see that image and I want to be in that place. I want to know that I can build the thing that I need, which at some level, I feel like the only thing I need is a dance floor. Like, fuck the rest of this shit. And if I can be that body in that picture, it's okay. This is a quote by Dag Hammarskjöld, who was the second Secretary General of the UN. But to me, it's a symbol of my parents. My parents were a bicultural, binational, interracial couple that married at the end of the Nigerian Civil War in 1970. And this plaque still sits in their living room. To be free, to be able to stand up and leave everything else behind without looking back. To say yes. That's it. If you're interested in becoming a part of it, the little video that I showed you at the beginning is on the 3 Arts webpage. We're 82% funded right now. No donation is too small.
Hello. Oh no. It's going to be a delayed satisfaction joke. You know, rarely do you get that timing when your collaborator is a PowerPoint presentation. So I already feel really lucky to be here. My name is Meg Dugan, and I am a performance artist with a studio practice. In 1998, Senga Noguchi, aka Lily B. Moores, in her poetic feminist manifesto, Lilies of the Valley Unite, or Not, stated, "I proclaim you art." The 3-word quote cuts to the heart of what I consider to be a feminist social practice. You know what? I'm going to do this. I'm not as movement-bound as Anya is. So my work hovers someplace between the tactics of relational aesthetics, feminist performance art, and Wile E. Coyote. Today, I'm going to walk you through where things started, an aha moment, and the Tramp Project, which is part of a multi-year interdisciplinary project that I am somewhere in the middle of. And oh good, there's a timer here, which makes me feel better. I studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 1999. I graduated with studying papermaking and ceramics, and I immediately became a performance artist, and through a series of 6 public fights in the year 2000. This is the pumpkin fight. And started kind of my role as a performance artist, just to kind of give you a sense of where we are in the timeline. This is 2 years before flash mobs started. And the public was invited to participate in these kind of in these fights. Slowly but surely, I started to build up what I would consider a kind of a relational aesthetics practice at the time, and kind of culminating before I left Chicago in a silent dance party that took place on the steps of the MCA. In 2002, I wrote a letter to the MCA saying I have an idea for a silent dance party where I spin a transmission to 50 wireless headsets that the audience come in and dance to. Oddly enough, I wrote the letter to whom it may concern, because you should do that with the Museum of Contemporary Art, and they got back to me. And so about a year later, I was the first silent dance party that I participated in. In 2003, I decided to go to grad school, and I moved to upstate New York and went to Bard College. And an interesting thing happens when one goes to a new school after developing a series of community of people that you work with. I used to have 30 to 50 people who would just show up and do things with me, as well as just kind of the members of the general public. As soon as I moved to Bard, I lost my community. I had a different kind of community, but Bard is a low residency program where you're in for 2 months and then you're out for 10 months. So for that first 2 months, I did a whole bunch of smiling projects with my community, and then I went to intern at the Headland Center for the Arts. And I ended up focusing on some solitary performances because I no longer had my community. And what happened was I started to really focus in on how my interest of humor and play the Wile E. Coyote started to come out in some way, shape, or form. How humor and play were central to my research. So I started researching slapstick, basically comedy from about 1880 to early television, 1960 or so. And I was very interested in the structures around slapstick, and I started to do this project called the Episode Project, where I would recreate a media moment in a public location, document it through a photographer, and then present it. I came back for my second year at Bard with images that looked a lot like this. Images that are considered kind of classic documentation. I will explain what happened to my nose in just a second, by the way. And gave a slide presentation and kind of walked out, and everyone's like, great, you get credit, keep going. This year and go on and make your work. And after I left the room and gave a slide presentation, I thought, wow, I've been performing for a few years now, and I'm very, very tired of showing just documentation. These images don't do it for me in a gallery. So I started to erase myself out of the images and draw them back in comic book form and print them as photographs. And just to give you a sense of what this is, and this was a much longer series. I built myself a wax nose with a wick in it and lit it on fire while simultaneously lighting a cigarette and put it out in my drink. That is a classic I Love Lucy sketch. And this was part of kind of my graduate thesis among a series of kind of individual performances. Over the intermediary 10 years, I'm going to kind of skip a kind of very long lineage where I kind of start with the relational aesthetics, move into kind of these singular performances, and then talk about the aha moment. The aha moment is that performances are meant to be documented. That documentation should spur another performance, another exhibition, another installation, and the snake should be eating its tail. And in that case, my performance practice has become a practice wherein which a performance rejiggers pieces and parts in which I use in my studio kind of over and over again until they're almost dust, more or less. I have certain things that I reuse or repurpose, and these are kind of just all examples. The Tyvek suit, the ladder, bubble wrap, paper, this kind of black and white cartoon motif, and then there's kind of a suitcase in the back. So over the intermediate 10 years, my work has now been performance, exhibition, installation, performance, and these kind of pieces interchange. So, in 2006, now I go back. In 2006, I left grad school, and as a part of my research, I found a book called James Agee and Charlie Chaplin, The Untold Story. In 1947, James Agee penned a screenplay that was written for Charlie Chaplin, but that was never produced. In the back of this book that I happened to pick up, because it's part of my research, the screenplay was printed, and I wrote a letter to the Agee Foundation saying, hi, I'm a performance artist, let me produce your film. I went back and forth with their lawyer, and it dropped. In 2012, they switched lawyers, and the foundation got a hold of my letter and actually emailed me and said, are you still interested? In the meantime, my practice has changed as outlined, and I said, yes, I am still interested. And they said, great, give us a film options proposal. And I said, can I have a month? And they said, you had 7 years, so yes, you can have a month. And I immediately had to Google what film options were, because I was a performance artist. So the story is important. It's an anti-nuclear, post-apocalyptic romp in which Charlie Chaplin's classic tramp character is the last person left on Earth for the majority of the film. Slowly but surely, there are two communities that come up: the scientists who create the film who created the technology, who dropped the bomb, and then the trans community. In the end, everyone goes back to the technological way of life, and the tramp walks off alone in the sunset. This is giving me the opportunity to re-envision Charlie Chaplin's tramp character as a woman. So often, that sense of humor and that kind of sense of slapstick is never mapped onto the female body. So this is how the project works. I've broken up the script to generate a series of installations, exhibitions, and performances. Those artworks create documentation. That documentation is edited into a feature-length film. I am somewhere in the middle of this. And now I'm just going to kind of go through a very few of the projects that I've been working on since 2012. This is the prototype for the trans community. This was done at Sabina Ott's Terrain Projects, and this was a prototype for how I kind of envisioned the trans community. You will see that there is a pair of red heels kind of set next to the trans community, or these prototypes, and that's because I cut this entire sculpture while wearing those heels and documented that. That film was actually later re-screened onto Mindy Rose Schwartz's project on the same house. Then again, eating its tail. Anytime I can kind of remind people that I have ovaries, I do. Thank you for the 5 people who laughed. And what really that did was spur the next project, in which I decided that the trans community should look different. It should now, I liked the way it looked, but I didn't like the materiality of it. So then it spurred kind of the next set of that portion of the project, which was to build the community with a series of an open structure that was of wood studs and fabric kind of pulled around it. What that allows me to do is to fold the entire set up into suitcases and transport them, which is again part of my work. I often transport work in suitcases as these kind of undocumented performances. In the beginning, I did a fundraiser for Making Rebel. Again, I like ladders. So you would pay $5, you would receive a plate, you would take the plate up the ladder and smash. It's Rebel. Conveniently, I need Rebel for my post-apocalyptic film. And again, they have been swept up into suitcases as part of the run of the exhibition. The space that I did that in about 3 years ago actually requested again this year that I come back and do it again, and to pick a charity to donate money to. So we raised like $600 for Planned Parenthood this year, and I have that Rebel as well. I promise not to filibuster myself, by the way. I see the time. I additionally did this exhibition called Production with Models at the Hairpin Art Center, where I created a bomb, a plane. This is a farm. This is a suburb. And then I created the city of Chicago. At the closing, the public was invited to help me blow up the city of Chicago in a series of stop animation shorts, in which the public was asked to make fire, and with fire and cotton balls, we blew up the city, because those are the tools that I have at hand. I think 2 14-year-olds ran the camera while the audience kind of directed me into how to explode the city. It was recently redone again at the Cultural Center. And then lastly, I kind of came back around to the production of the trans community again. So this is my playlist. And this happened at the Co-Prosperity Sphere. The Co-Prosperity Sphere is a community space in which many, many people come through, and there are kind of constant events. And within these events, there's also a radio station that is run out of that arena that I actually believe Lumpen Radio tomorrow is carrying open engagement. So I asked to build a trans community there, and they said, we have a radio station, it's gonna be really loud. So I actually created this set list, and we mic'd the part of the gallery, and with the DJ, within one DJ set, we cut a record that is construction sounds over DJing that was put out live on air. And then through the rest of the run of the show, the gallery was open for people to come help me cover these pieces. Slowly but surely. Also, I think there was a D&D event in there that had like 100 guys kind of playing D&D. There was a working bikes event in my pieces. And then at the end of the show, Dan Sullivan played while two folks dressed in lab coats as scientists helped break down the pieces and pack them into suitcases. This is the beginning of kind of having the sets now functioning. The rest of the sets are open. They're open to the public. It's a semi-silent film. Sound does not matter. So as we kind of shoot through the scene, it will allow for a permeable set of kind of public performance and public interaction. And I think that's it. Are there any questions? All right.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Maggie Pocket, and I'm going to be presenting my project called Seeds in Service. And this project is a collaboration. I work with Melissa Hilliard-Potter. She was one of the co-curators of the exhibition downstairs. So we collaborate because the only way to really make paper making and urban gardening useful for us is to share the labor that's involved. Because there is a ton of it. It's very hard work. It's seasonal work. It's everyday work. And so we share the labor and we share the credit. And we do this because it is part of our beliefs that a really truly sustainable life and an art practice requires collaboration. So here I have the devil collaborating with us. More on that soon. So 53 is a number that scares the crap out of me. And the reason why is 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. And that terrifies me, especially as a white woman. It makes me sick, and I was surprised when it happened, but I shouldn't be surprised. If you look at the history of this country, it is rooted in racism, genocide, colonization, and slavery. So maybe we shouldn't be so surprised that many white women did vote for Donald Trump. And especially coming out of Obama's administration, the first time having a black person in the White House, obviously that inspired Donald Trump on his birther movement, and that could have helped propel him into the White House now. So what terrifies me is thinking about what is their end game? What does this all-white nation look like? And so I think about it, and this is sort of what some of that looks like. These are all from the Southern Poverty Law Center's very extensive list on white supremacists in this country who have murdered people based on racist reasons. In the last 10 to 15 years, there has been a major increase in the white hate groups in this country. And so I like to think of my artwork as a way to make this a better place and to speak truth to power and to defy the white supremacists. So one thing white people need to recognize, and sometimes they don't, is that there's a lot of work that we need to do to make this a less racist country. And we have to recognize first that there are devils in our midst. They're not just the bad apples, they're not just mentally ill, that there's systemic reasons why they exist. And it's rarely called terrorism, which it really needs to be called out as. It is the most amount of domestic terrorist events in America are perpetrated by white men. So, can we decolonize the colonizer? I don't know if that makes sense, but can I decolonize my life? Can I decolonize my art practice? What does that look like? How does that happen? And so, we can look at something happier. Oh yeah, these are pilgrims that I thought kind of looked like me, both the man and the woman, so. Oh, that was kind of fun. Okay, so, make something more beautiful. All right, the Papermaker's Garden. This is just a few blocks up on Wabash and 8th, and I hope you guys can come and see it over the summer when it's blossoming like this. This is an outdoor studio. Mel and I consider it that way. We actually have paper-making equipment that we can take down there. We can cook fibers, we can clean fibers, beat them, pull sheets, make artwork, install artwork, let artwork decay. We can do a lot out there. We hold events as well. I'll get to some of those later. And we can, really interact with nature. Putting your hands into soil makes you happier. Science has proved this. And we really get to watch things grow, we get to nurture them, and we get to eat them too, which is fun. And the parts that we don't eat, we make into paper, turn it into artwork. We save seeds, we share seeds. So there's a lot that we can do out there. And so we have a really big, crazy long process, and so I kind of made this roundabout here that helps you. This is somewhat seasonal. We don't always just go in a circle, we skip around, but it helps to see it this way. Because it is a holistic process, and it involves our life choices into our art practice, and it's not just something separate. So, seed saving at the top, plants start with seeds, and so we've been able to do a lot of research and sourcing from heirloom seeds all over this wonderful country, things that have come from other countries, individuals on Etsy selling seeds, people who come to the garden and say, here are seeds that my mother saved, please plant them. So we have a lot of fun that way. And then, obviously we plant the seeds and we get to grow the plants. We harvest the plants and make paper with them, and the paper turns into artwork. We do artist books, printmaking, lots of different things with them. So seed saving. Here is a small collection of some of our corn seeds and a few other pieces too. Why are seeds so important? Seeds are pretty radical and revolutionary. And if you think about all the different varieties of plants on this planet, so many of them have gone extinct, so we'll never be able to get their seeds and grow them. And the ones that have, they're being very quickly and systematically destroyed by habitat destruction. Climate change is wreaking havoc on them, and also industrial farming and seed banks. So you see a lot of pressure on seed collections. One thing to remember too is that 60% of the calories that are eaten on this planet come from only 3 crops: rice, maize, and wheat. But there are over 300,000 known edible plants, so it's kind of crazy that we stick to those. So we like to collect various varieties of different plants and then do some rare ones as well. So here is one of my artist books that I created. It's an accordion seed library, and this was inspired by the Jane Addams Hull House nationality maps that were made in like 1895. And the Hull House is around the neighborhood of where UIC is now. The museum is there as well, so you can go check that out, very cool. They had a seed library there, and so our first year, Mel and I collaborating, we marched down there, we looked through their seed library, and we picked out some pretty awesome plants to grow. And I made this accordion book based on the nationality map from the neighborhood when Jane Addams was working. And so many immigrant families were there, and she made a map of all of them. And for each nationality, I paired it up with a seed. And so each kind of slot has a different nationality, and it has paper embedded with vegetable seeds in it for each one. And so it talks about the diversity of people and the diversity of plants. And this is another method that we've used for distributing seeds. We've made seed packets. These were sort of crazy. Handmade paper is kind of an uneven texture and often, challenging with printmaking. On top of that, we made shaped sheets so that they were like envelopes that could be folded up into the packets. And we letterpress printed onto those. And that was pretty funny because there's no like straight edges. It was very hard to register things, but we did it. And it's, it's a challenge though to take a piece of artwork and then try to distribute the seed packets to people who will definitely grow them. So we struggle with that sometimes. So we try other methods of preserving and sharing seeds. One of my favorite gardens, we did this last year, called War Garden, Seeds of Displacement. This is a collaboration with Experimental Farm Network, and they are an incredible nonprofit. They're fighting climate change through preserving heirloom seeds that could grow better under stress. Too much water, not enough water, extreme weather events. And they, as a network, they partner with other gardeners. So I collaborated with them to take seeds from war-torn areas, conflict zones that were very rare, and we planted them in our garden. I wish we could see the text. So sometimes we don't think about seeds and agriculture as being something that is lost from war, but a couple of interesting stories. We're all familiar with Abu Ghraib in Iraq and what that's famous for, but before it was a place for torture, it was the seed bank that was very well known to farmers there. And when the US invaded, the seed bank was looted, and the seeds were destroyed and lost. And that's a cultural heritage that can never be gotten back. Similarly, when the Taliban looted Afghanistan's seed bank, they thought that the plastic bottles that they had the seeds in were very useful, so they threw out the seeds, kept the plastic. Very dangerous. So we tried to take some rare seeds and regrow them out here. This is another garden that is inspired by other people who are trying to preserve their heritage. So the Zapatistas are a leftist resistance movement in southern Mexico, and they grow this really beautiful, amazing corn, but South Mexico has a really long growing season. They do share their seeds. I was able to get some. We grew them. You can't really see, I guess the size is off, but these plants were almost like 15 feet tall. They were really, really large. We did not get corn from them because we did not have long enough to grow, but we got a lot of fiber for paper making. So that was good. And here, so with corn, it's a wind-pollinated plant. And so if anyone else in the neighborhood is growing corn, they could cross-pollinate with mine. And so a technique I used, even though I didn't get corn this year, you could be used on other corn, was to, you have to isolate the ears and the tassels so that you can preserve the genetic quality of that particular corn. But it was a site for an intervention of artistic pieces as well. So some of the other plants we grew there, the Three Sisters method you might be familiar with. Corn is grown with squash and beans as well. They provide support and shade for each other. And so you can get a whole trio of vegetables. We also did some nice cilantro and tomatillos. So here's a quick shot at some of the paper making process. We, yes, have to chop down and cook our plants. That can take days. Then we have to clean them so that we have good quality paper. We have to beat them up in a machine. Sometimes you can do it by hand if you have a lot of aggression. And then you can actually make the sheets. So one way that I've chosen to share the Zapatista seeds was by making these little kind of artistic radical tamales. And so I made an accordion book structure that I'll show you the detail of the other side on the next slide. And inside of that had the 10-point plan that the Zapatista women came up with. And so the Zapatistas come originally from Mayan communities, which is a very misogynistic community. Women are very much, invisible. They're there to make food and raise the children. Everything else they're quiet about. But in the EZLN, the Zapatista army, they have rights like anybody else. And so they have this 10-point plan where women have the right to participate in the struggle, to work for a salary. They have health care. They decide how many children they want. They get education. They participate in community affairs, and so on. And so along with the accordion book structure, I also included the seeds so that people who got these could grow the corn. So also with that, we got to eat, so we made real tamales. And so here we made some nice vegan ones that were the Three Sisters. So we have the handmade heirloom masa around, and then inside was the squash and the beans. Another event that we got to do, Capers for the Socialist. So this is with nasturtium seeds, which are, the whole plant of nasturtiums are edible. The seeds can be actually pickled to be like, they're called poor man's capers. But as a socialist, I thought, let's get the classist system out of there. These are capers for the socialist. So we did a pickling event where you could pickle foods, and it's a way to teach people how to reduce food waste by preserving them. And so we did quick kind of refrigerator pickles, and we did, basically everything that was growing in the garden in like early July, I think it was. So lots of great fresh foods. So on top of that, I am from Logan Square, and so I work in a community garden there. It's called Corner Farm Chicago, and it's on the corner of Altgeld and Sawyer, if you guys could want to go visit. And we grow tons of different vegetables there. It was also founded by artists and activists, and so there was always an intention to grow fibers and dye plants there. And so they invited me to come. I'm kind of their artist in residence. But the best part about it is that 90% of the food that we grow there, we donate to the Christopher House food pantry that's across the street. And so it's really fun to kind of grow some really crazy things. These over here on the far are Mexican sour gherkins. They're about the size of like your thumb, and they taste sort of lemony, and they produce very well out there too. They're very delicious, so it's a cool rare plant. Also Hopi red dye amaranth, which is a food dye, not a plant or a fiber dye, and then nasturtiums. And then this here is it's kind of like a mushroom that grows on corn. It's a delicacy. It's called huitlacoche in the Nahuatl language, but some of the other words for it translate to things like raven's shit. So it's a very delicious thing. Tastes like a corn mushroom combo. On our other gardens, this is sort of where Mel and I really intersect, is our women's health garden. And it's called Post Roe v. Wade, but actually the really long actual title is Baba Yaga's Post Roe v. Wade Transmenopause Garden. And it cultivates plants that address women's health issues. We did a lot of research into different plants that have historically been used to, allow women to control their own reproduction. So here are some of our plants from that. We've got tansy, yarrow, rue, and borage. Some really common plants too, like basil, have been used in this way too, so they're out there. Oh my God, I wish we could see these guys. Okay, so part of what that research into women's health led me into was looking at witchcraft, looking at ways that women were silenced for practicing natural medicine, that they were told, oh, are you healing somebody? You weren't trained by doctors, by men, so that must be the devil's work. So I was looking into my genealogical history because my grandma always said we were related to a Salem witch. So I was like, I gotta find this out. And I'm really lucky that my grandmother's side did keep a lot of records, so I was able to go onto wikitree.com and upload all of my information. And I was able to connect to some actual Salem witch trial relatives. We can't see them all here, but there's like 19 blood relatives that I'm related to there. Most of them were like distant cousins many times removed, but some of them are very close. So Susanna Martin, she was one of the women hanged. She's my 10th great-grandmother. And she was not the one my grandma was telling me about. And I still haven't connected to that witch yet. But I did find this, and so I've been making a body of work and a garden sort of based on this. Another person I'm related to from that time was Cotton Mather, and he was the reverend who was prosecuting the witches. And he said of my 10th great-grandmother that this woman was one of the most impudent, scurrilous, wicked creatures of this world. And that was just because she could hold her own, and she said, no, I am not a witch, and she laughed at their accusations. But she was old, and they were able to take advantage of her, and so she was convicted. So one of the pieces that I'm working on based on this is it's a family tree, and I'm making these corn figures out of the corn that we grow. And so here you can see the chain. The very top one is Susanna, and her daughter, and her son, and so on, down into, and that's me at the very, very bottom there. So it's our family tree and how we're related. Each, you can see here. Each woman has tied to her a tea bag, and it has her name, and then a plant that's from our women's health garden. And so you could take all of these tea bags together and make a very magical potion for women's health. And so, yes, here is another piece from the garden here. So I'm working on a book that will describe all the different plants in the witch garden. And it's so witchcraft and colonial warfare, why that? So if you really dig into the Salem history, we're not just looking at, the devil and witchcraft, but what was going on at the same time in the context. So the Indian Wars were going on, and a lot of the people from Salem had survived great massacres and lost tons of people in their family. And so it's this fear inside of Salem that's kind of going on at the time that inspires this garden as well. So we're going to have both European, old world plants and then new world plants as well, kind of combining to talk about the clash, this very deadly clash of cultures. And so finally, I have here just a group of happy women singing and dancing spiritually with their medicinal herbs. And I have a quote here from the Malleus Maleficarum, which was the best-selling book on how to hunt witches back in the day. And it says, when a woman thinks alone, she thinks evil. And I interpret that as, instead of, she needs a man to think for her, don't work by yourself, don't be solitary. You need to collaborate with other people, so that's it.
My name is Stephanie Graham, and me, along with my collaborator, Maya McCrandala, are #New Global Matriarchy. And #New Global Matriarchy is an inheritance space that exists simultaneously online and in real space. We launched in 2016, and it has taken many forms, from performance and installation to wearable arts and Instagram posts. So today Maya and I created a film that we're gonna show, and then we'll have Q&A after that.
Hey Oya, it's your girl Lakshmi. A few months ago, I decided to hit up this Women's March in LA. I know some of our black and brown sisters weren't too happy about some of the aspects of this march, so I figured I'd check in with some of the women of color who chose to attend. I invited them to do a little thought exercise with me. It went like this. Close your eyes. I want you to imagine the future. Your future. In this future, all women are free. By all women, we mean black women, trans women, indigenous women, queer people, immigrant women, poor women. We mean women of every ability, every race, every religion, country, and community. We mean a new global matriarchy. I want you to find yourself, your body, in this future. What is it like? Is there a taste, a smell? Are you with anyone? What are you doing? Tell me about it.
Tell me about it.
Oh, that's powerful. Boy, I see myself with my family, which is a absolute family of all women. I have 4 sisters. I see myself with my friends. I see myself just hand in hand living and feeling free and feeling empowered and not being scared and feeling safe. And I'm a singer. I see myself singing to just millions of people and just sharing my life and feeling like I do have a part in this world, and there's a reason why I am here, and there's a reason why everybody is here. And I smell bacon and a few pancakes. And it's just brunch for everybody.
Honestly, I think the way I feel about that is, since we're all equal and we're all free and there's no question of our human rights or anything like that, like, it's like a small little piece of paradise, It's that thing we've always dreamed of that we feel is so out of reach, but it's not. Like, that's why we're doing what we're doing here today. It's not out of reach. We can get there, and I'm there with all the people I love, men, women, everyone. I mean, this is something that we all need to do. Feminism isn't a thing. It's common sense. It's not just what I believe, what she believes. It's common sense. This is something that we should never question, and I think that to get there, to be in that place, it would be amazing.
I mean, that pretty much describes my personal life already right now, but I think the next step is bringing that about for everybody else. So I'm not actually sure what to do. I feel like my heart is in that place, but still trying to figure out the best use of my time and energy to take actions to make sure other women are free too.
So, okay, that's a loaded statement. It makes me feel hopeful. It makes me feel like that is the future, that there'll be visibility for women of color, poor women, trans women. It's important. And I do think it'll happen. Probably not sooner than later, but I think we're headed there. This is a bad answer. I'm bad at this.
I don't even know if I can react to all of that, other than to say that I think that future's a lot closer than we all think.
So it doesn't have to be like an essay, just like how would you feel like to actually live in that?
It would be amazing. And it would be just that feeling of we matter and everybody is respected, man, woman, child, just, life. It would be amazing. But I think it's a lot closer than people think. We got to keep it up. Thank you. You're welcome.
Girl, my feelings about this march were mixed. I think we've seen that it finally got white people and non-white people who thought they were safe over the past few years out in the streets, and they're showing up more now, in particular with the airport protests. But I was disappointed in this culture's inability to articulate the dreams they have for the future. What are the hashtag squad goals of New Global Matriarchy? What are the hashtag life goals of liberation? We need to be able to experience that future with all our senses if we want to make it a reality. So I don't know about you, but I'll keep speaking the truth, no matter what.
I was not interested in the Women's March because I believe that this is not a black woman's issue. Due to the fact that majority of white women voted for Trump willingly, knowing the knowledge that he has and his take on women's issues. After all of that, all that he said, Trump still gained the presidency. And now these women want to go out and march against it? Nope, not my fight. Being a black woman, I voted, I protested, I gave money to ensure that this person would not be elected and harm women's rights across the board. And as a result, white women still chose their race over their gender and voted for this man who has dismantled all of those rights that women would benefit from. And you know what? This also made me think about the women's suffrage movement, on how white women want black women to collude with them for their benefit. And I felt this was bad, and I just wasn't going to be a part of it. Hey, Lakshmi girl. That was just one entry of several that I got when I posed the question, why didn't you go to the protest? A lot of women didn't go, and I can understand why. And because of that, I decided to grab every single white woman that voted for Trump. That's right, I have all their names, I have where they live, I have their ages, I know every single thing about them. And you know what? As we speak, they are being snatched up and taken to my secret place, and we are all gonna have a talk because we are at a loss. Women want women to band together and do all this stuff, and they're gonna vote for Trump and stand against other people, and it is just a complete disaster. Never in all my career of being a goddess have I felt so stumped. I feel like there has to be some reprogramming, if you will, on these chicks. Yeah, we have some work to do. We have to define our hashtag squad goals, and we need to define them quick and put them into action quick. I had another woman reach out to me and tell me that she deliberately did not participate because she just thought that the protest was dumb. She says, "It's like I've been screaming about being beat down and you ignore me. Then one day you stub your toe and you want to rally? How? How, fam? It's like an effort that's a little too late." From people who mostly have never experienced inequality in their lives. And I feel like half of this crowd look like they're out there with something fun to do. Pictures for Instagram. Fun time to gather your friends and take the metro down for an afternoon in the inner city. Give me a break. I do have some advice for white women though. Women should start working under the advice of women of color. Look up resources specifically about how to effectively be a white ally and work humbly and quietly. Maybe if this was 10 years ago, I would have went to the protest, and that would have been just out of curiosity, but I'm just not with it. Anyway, maybe I'll call you back later and read you some more messages that I got. Hope you're doing well. I'll talk to you soon. Hit me back immediately so we can get to work. Bye, girl. So as you can see, the Women's March was a conflicted space. And so I wanted to ask you guys if you would help us, the goddesses, in defining what our squad goals should be. So, you know, obviously the goal is that we can all come together, but we don't feel that we are together. And so I wondered if anyone in the audience might have some suggestions that we can take into place. Because at this point, you know, we can create art and we can imagine and do all that fun art performance stuff, but there needs to be real action. And so it doesn't have to be anything grand, but I wanted to hear what maybe some small actions that you guys might want to take. Hey, Meg. Does anybody have anything? Yes, please.
It's not really a small action, but I found working in the community dialogue, doing the work of becoming a white ally really helped. It helped me personally, but it helped me understand more and be able to hear like everybody's voice. But I feel like in feminism, I think that that's a really big part of it, that white women do need to sort of step back and be allies and like, bring the movement along, but not necessarily dictate.
What resources did you go to learn out of curiosity?
There's a book, I can't remember the author's name, but it's about, it's even called, I need to pronounce it.
That's all good. It's a book. It's a book that's cool versus like, oh, Barbara has a workshop.
It's a book about like how to have dialogue and about race, and it's, I have to look it up. I'll get back to you.
Okay. Yes, please.
So I photographed 500 people sending a message to Trump since the election, and that's just a small part. But what I want to do is see a book, like she just said, like something people can hold in your hand, something you can share with children, that can give you links to your video, but also can digest something that you've done into a page on Stephanie Graham and what she's been doing since the election, a page on this person, a page on that, a chapter on this person, whatever. Something that shows what has been happening, the conversations that have been happening, maybe just in the first 100 days, and collect those things from around, because I think it's a book we would all eventually, not we would all, just people would like to hold in their hands. And I think it's very powerful when you see things recorded. I know it was powerful for me to watch struggles from the civil rights movement and to hold those books in my hand. And I think it could be powerful again if we think future forward.
Awesome.
I started going to my alderman's meetings, monthly meetings, and requesting that TIP funding no longer go to corporations, but instead go to the people in my neighborhood as a form of small business grants. As like an actual, because I feel like so often activists are requested to fill in for broken policy. And that maybe we should stop asking to fill in for broken policy and instead ask for the policy to be fixed.
One that I think everybody could stop and do this afternoon, which is download or go check out Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, who said it in 1983 better than pretty much anybody else I could possibly think of. It's one of the greatest intersectional texts I've ever read in my life, and it will help provide what is necessary to move forward.
What was interesting is when I asked the question about why people didn't protest, I had a few Trump supporters actually like, oh, I know why. And it was so funny. They were like talking to the goddess Oya about why they decided that they didn't want to participate. And it was sort of like, okay, like, whatever, your fault. But I wanted to be open. And I thought it was sort of cool that they were, you know, were open to having the conversation one-on-one like that. And a lot of them I gave that text to. It's like, kind of report back. Yeah.
I feel like as a biracial or multiracial person, I have like this we have this particular space where we're sort of like navigating between the racial lines, and I feel like for me, it's been like my journey and my goals have been like learning languages and reading and traveling if you can, or going to school, or just kind of taking a personal look into your own history and trying to figure out where you come from. And in that sense, I think you find that you're more connected to everyone in ways that you don't even realize that transcend race and get you to sort of different sort of spiritual level of understanding human connection and just the connection of you to the earth and different spaces in nature. But I think it's also important, like I think all of these suggestions are awesome and like very like practical. Like we need books, we need to reference these things. And I feel like honestly, like I just want to sit down with people and eat food. Like when you read that text, which I thought was so beautiful about imagining that space, which it makes me emotional to think about because we don't have those spaces. And I just think I'm so happy to be here with everyone having this conversation because we don't have those spaces. And we came from Root Work this morning, which is like such an amazing fucking space, and those people are doing such great work. But you know what? It's like there's also like militarism and surveillance and all these really crazy other things that are like crushing down on our ability to just connect honestly with another person. So I feel like it's not even a suggestion or advice, it's like what I do is just like connect to people on an honest way that isn't like, and that includes Instagram and that includes all those other spaces that are digital, because that is a space, I work a lot with young people, that's a space where young people know how to connect to people because they can't travel and they can't get the fuck out of wherever the hell they are. So I think we cannot discount the digital space as a space of radical power and connection. So I would say just like eat food with people and then just text, and I think you'll be good.
I like that. Okay, yeah, because I think it's important to have conversations, and you know, one of the things that Maya and I really want to work on is engaging more conversation in, you know, digital spaces, if it's, you know, one-on-one, like through Facebook Messenger, if it is meeting at, you know, a restaurant, whatever, at someone's house, to have these conversations. And it's really cool to be invited to speak here and see all of you and then be able to hear what other people are doing, the person right next to you, what they're doing. I don't know, I went to school here, so we didn't have this when I was here. I was telling Mel that, and I was like, God damn it. But I'm glad that it's here now, because it's important. So like as we keep, you know, as the world just keeps going, we'll keep having more great things. So, yeah, I don't know if there's any other, yeah.
This is more an observation than really an answer to your question. But I think one of the reasons why it's so unsurprising that a lot of the people we interviewed or were interviewed in this short clip were so startled by the question of, you know, this imagination of this, seemingly dystopic future, is because it's for the very same reason that it was so hard to imagine for many of us, a Trump administration, and how for the longest time, so many people who eventually went to the SMART could have never imagined that someone like him could reform, but so many people of color who have been fighting for, who have been fighting these fights for a very long time, have been living that reality. So I think it's equally important to imagine, to believe this reality that we're living in, and to fully realize its effects. And in order to arrive at this progressive future that we all believe in, is to imagine the material blueprint, what policy looks like, what streets look like, what cities look like. And I think imagining these very material structures is very important. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Oh, close us out.
All right. I like so much what you're doing with New Global Matriarchy, and I think as we think about New Global Matriarchy, we also have to check out the past and how we got here, and the stolen labor and stolen land that is the foundation of this country. And I see conversations about history so that some of the ignorance that's at the root of what we're experiencing right now can be dealt with.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Summers. In my day job capacity here at Columbia College Chicago, I'm Associate Dean of Student Life. And by night, I'm a insane knitter. This started a few years ago when my children were teenagers. Before that, I had one knitting class when I was 8. So I can basically only go back and forth. And people have tried to encourage me to learn other things, and I'm like, I just, honest to God, want to go back and forth. So what I'm going to talk about is not complicated. It's only a series of scarves. That's it. So I'm going to talk about Team Agora. Team Agora is a knitting collective that we started a few years ago. And here's the problem. So in my entire professional life, and even before that, I don't know whether I'm just dumb. I don't know whether I'm just misinformed, but I have this sort of how hard can it be attitude until I start doing things, and then I realize they're actually really hard. So I made a documentary film. Never done that before. It was awesome. Don't know if it was any good, but I did it. Formed a dance company. I've done a couple of things. But I always start with this sort of how hard can it be idea, and then I just go for it. The real key to the kind of work, and especially when you get into community work, where you're working online toward a physical project, is just keep going. So you just knit and knit and knit, and you don't quit. So yarn bombing, this community is all about volume. So I started a few years ago when my children were approaching their teenage years, which is awesome. Moms, teens, yeah. It's that time when you have to physically be there for them, and it's the time when they do not want you anywhere near them, right? So I picked up some needles and I started knitting, and I created a car cozy. Of course, I couldn't do it myself. I only had about 3 months to get it done, so I started pulling in my mom. Started pulling in my mom's best friend. I started pulling in anybody who knitted who'd be interested in making a 5x8 square of green. We knitted the entire car inside and out, and it was really fun. The tires, the wheel. The only problem with that project was, and you could actually drive it, was that when I went to leave the event, the yarn got stuck around the horn, and it wouldn't go off. So I had to kill the horn on my car in order to get through that one. After that, I went on to Big Balls. This was my favorite. Really short-lived, not a lot of attention, but I had a great deal of fun making this. On Wabash, you see the planters that they just put grass in, and I kept walking by them thinking they just look like golf ranges, right? Like, why is there just grass there? But I kind of loved them, and I'm like, well, I should put just giant white golf tees on them, you know, with big white balls, which was the original name, but I was talked out of that. But anyway, it was supposed to be called Big White Balls, just became Big Balls. And I want to talk a little bit about the process. And in this particular process, for me, the interesting part is I only, again, go back and forth, nothing fancy, not that talented. What do I use for the form? So underneath the golf tee is actually a toilet plunger from the dollar store, $1. And then the balls are soccer balls. So after that, I made a Kim Davis doll. Everybody know Kim Davis? Kim Davis is the county clerk from Kentucky who refused to issue gay marriage licenses. So I don't know why, I just became obsessed with Kim Davis. I made a Kim Davis doll. And then a 55-year-old woman started taking her around with me. So the first place Kim and I went to was to have mammograms. And the radiologist was a little amused, not really, but she did let me layer and take photographs on the mammography table, and that was kind of awesome. So this is Kim at Taboo. She still lives and is running around. After that, I made Teeny Tiny Trump. He's been going all over the place with me. He actually became performance art, which I didn't anticipate, but one of the things I created for the Trump, he has a stroller, right? It's been a long time since I have had small children. He has a knitted stroller, but when I was at all right, I confess, I went to the Women's March. One of the things we did was I knitted poop. So I actually knitted poop. And so I would stop and say, oh my God, he needs a diaper change, it smells like shit. And then I would do a diaper change, and it was just really, really fun. We also did one in the Papermaker's Garden called Freebird, and that was just a series of birds' nests in all of the trees representing different things. So it was sort of an open source, anybody could do what they want. But the one I want to talk about mostly is Team Agora. So 2 years ago, I for years have been absolutely obsessed with the Agora statues, and does anybody not know Agora, the statues in Grant Park? They're a series of 6, 7, 8 foot bronze legs, only the bottom down. So they're legs poised in a walking position, and again, only from the waist down. So they are headless, heartless, armless legs, right? They're without thought or action. They only move. And the artist, Magdalena Abakanowicz, I've read quite a bit about her and about the work, and she was actually born in Poland during the Nazi occupation, World War II. And for her, part of this work is about oppression and about the feeling of being a very small child in the midst of those legs, of the not being able to see the heads, the hearts, the hands, and the feeling of smallness. So I take myself to Agora all the time and just kind of walk through. People typically don't walk through. If you observe Agora, what happens, people will come up to it, but they won't go inside. I think that we all sort of instinctively understand that going inside, we are going to feel powerless. We are going to feel small. We are going to feel surrounded by bronze, something that we can't fight, oppression, right? So it's a very disempowering feeling being inside of those legs. And what struck me was I felt like they'd been in the garden in Grant Park for so long doing such hard work, I wanted to give them a rest. So I see them as women, I don't know why, and so I decided we would put bunny slippers on them. So I don't know where the impulse really came from. It sort of just came from watching them, being with them, loving them, and then feeling like they needed to be recognized and given a rest. So I just had the idea, can we make 212 5-foot round in circumference bunny slippers? Can I actually do that? And I wasn't sure. But I started with a simple thing. I made a prototype. I made a pattern. And I took the pattern and I posted online. I invited a few knitting friends and I said, yo, you want to make 212 bunny slippers with me? Of course, people thought I was crazy. And pretty much any time I do a project, at the moment when I have the thought that always happens, which is people will think I'm crazy, that's the time I know I need to go faster. So I have to work through that impulse and that feeling. People will think I'm crazy. I am crazy. It's okay. Get to be 55, you can be as crazy as you fucking want. It's lovely. So I started pitching and building and pitching and building and pitching and building and getting more and more people on board. Anybody who would join me, didn't matter, come on, come on, come on. And then our friends, we created just a secret Facebook group and we started talking to each other. So then I have people from 14 states. I had 52 knitters, all committing 1 pair, 2 pair, 10 pair, whatever they could do, and they started working together. The tracking and measuring about killed me, and I don't know why counting to 212 is so hard, but somebody would commit, then they'd say, oh my God, my sister's in the hospital, no, I can't do it. Okay, I've got to get another one. It was just this constant tracking and measuring and going back and forth to make sure that we had enough. The awesome part was I got to sit in my home while I'm frantically knitting, and I mean frantically knitting, because I was all about the volume. Mine weren't high quality. And I would get boxes of bunny slippers in the mail. It was really awesome. So then I want to talk a little bit about permission. So here's the thing. I did not ask for permission. And I want to recognize that that's part of the privilege that I have to own in this process. I felt like I could. And so I didn't ask for permission. I was pretty sure I would be denied. What I did do instead was stage a couple of small actions to make sure that if there was a problem, we could work past it. The night before the installation, I had a friend of a friend of a friend, right? You use every resource you know who knows Ram's wife. And so I sent a note to her saying, would you get this to Ram's wife, just so she knows it's happening tomorrow morning. And I had a couple of friends on the police force, some in the 1st District. I was like, hey, this is happening tomorrow. So, you know, it's all good. They're only going to be up for a week. And then, so I worked a couple of routes in that way. And then the other thing that I did that is really terrible, but I'm going to confess to you all right now, I put my mother as the first person any official would see when they came on, and they would have to talk to her. So while everybody else was out working and on the installation, they had to talk to my mom first. So I used shame. Not above it. And they were only up for a week. So we also had signage to make sure everyone understood it was only a week. We didn't damage anything. There was no change in the installation. Well, that didn't work so well. Okay. Anyway, the installation was pretty hardcore. It was in the pouring, freezing rain. It was awesome. But I had a team of 10, 15 people who came to help, including my mom and my kids. And we did the full installation. And where's Nisa? Is Nisa here? No. Yeah, so the best part was the response. Like people, it was funny, I wasn't really sure what I was going for. I wasn't sure if the message was going to be received. You know, I had written some text, I kept it up. But the response was incredible, and it was mostly, of course, from children. Children came in, and they just had so much fun, and they would talk to me, and they would find their favorite pair. It was just really awesome. So here's the text, and I'm going to just, because I can't read, but so the text was, good night, Agora. We've come to offer you a rest, a deep, beautiful rest that you can rise again and continue your work. You came here to teach us, to make us remember what it is to feel small, without power, overwhelmed by the weight of oppression. You teach us to meet oppression by looking up and standing tall against it. You insist we amplify the voices of those not seen or heard. You remind us to embrace our humanity and to love each other. We are humbled and strengthened by your presence. Happy Mother's Day, Agora. We know who you are and we thank you. And happy Mother's Day to all who mother. And the all who mother part became more and more important to me as I worked through this process. I think I don't know, so many things happen, and I'm still processing a lot of the the piece, the act of doing it, the community, what happened, what didn't happen, my own privilege within this, the incredible absence of women of color, of men in this process. But I did lock in on something that I felt good about, and that was mother. And not mother the noun, mother the verb. To mother. That became really, really powerful to me. And it's something that and I think in our culture, really struggle with, because mother is so associated with childbirth that I think we've lost our ability to understand what to mother is, mothering. I know so many people who are brilliant mothers. And I'm sorry, it's not the fucking mother of all bombs. If I hear that one more time, I'm gonna lose it. That's not the intent. So the lessons I learned, which were many, I learned more and more about Agora, being with those statues all through the installation process, through the process of creation, was absolutely extraordinary. Still go to visit them all the time. As far as I'm concerned, it's one of our most powerful public art pieces in the city of Chicago. And I have to say, not universally loved or understood. I think it's very undervalued. About the process, about building community, it was extraordinary. Watching women connect with each other across the continent. And it was really something too, because, this is pre-Trump, but there were a few women in the group that came through my town of origin, which is very small, very white, very racist. And I knew that about them, but I brought them in, and as we started moving through the project, really deeper conversations were happening privately online in our little community. And I will say that one woman who has some really troubling values made a slipper, and she sent it to me. And I was so stunned, because when I got it, first of all, it wasn't a pair, as I instructed, it was only one. But second of all, the eyes were closed. And I thought, what a metaphor. Of all of the slippers that came from all of these people, from this one person, I get the slipper with the eyes closed. It was really something. And then about community. This is a quote. When we were visiting on Saturday, this family's youngest daughter came up to the statues and exclaimed, "I want to touch them all." And that was, to me, such a small thing, but so important, that it resonated with the children, and that the children bring their families. The children bring their parents. That's what our children do. They teach us. And then about mothering, again, the act of mothering, to mother. And I really want to continue thinking about that and exploring that idea. And then, of course, about privilege. Boy, did I learn a lot about my own privilege. I was challenged the entire time and continue to be challenged. Even just speaking to you today, there's a part of me that is vibrating inside, understanding that I didn't do enough to bring everyone in. And so I have work to do. And I'm here to acknowledge that and commit to doing that work. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ella Cooper. And this is my very, very first time in Chicago. Imagine you woke up at 5 a.m., you got on a plane, and then this conference, this symposium, was the first thing you experienced of a new city. That's me right now. And I just want to say I feel so inspired and grateful to have been invited to participate, so big thanks. And there will be nudity in this final presentation. So I am going to refer to my notes today because I love to ad-lib, but I know we're trying to stick to 10 minutes. But feel free to throw me off, and if you have a question to throw out there, go right ahead. So I am a photo video artist, filmmaker, community engaged artist, impact producer, educator, and the founder of Black Women Film Canada. Raise your hand if you hold like a whole gazillion titles and all the stuff that you do in the world. Yeah, like this is a thing. Over the last 6 years, I've been centering my work around creating participatory, embodied experiences for Black women and women of color to explore what it means to reclaim the body through photography and video. Often I create workshops that are grounded in natural settings across Canada, and I use art-based techniques to move people through an experience of self-actualization, community, Black joy, and something I'm now calling embodied elated resistance. It's kind of like, I always think of I want there to be dancing at my revolution. I want to be able to stand in my naked brown body with pride and in freedom and in joy. And this came from my initial research studying representation of the Black female body in Western art when I was doing a Master's of Education. And I was really interested in the lack of representation of Black women, and specifically the Black female nude in Canada's and North America's dominant visual culture and history. And also, like, speaking to you as a Canadian, we receive a lot of our imagery from the States. And so I'm really inspired by a lot of the artists and the work that is happening here, and also was trying to understand what does it mean to locate Black bodies in the land, in Canada as well, and what does land represent? So in 2010, I began an embodied autoethnographic and art-space inquiry to develop as an artist educator in order to build uplifting, holistic empowerment programs that could effectively address key societal and community needs while seeking to overturn dominant visual culture and create new discourse. So the images that I'm showing you, I don't always show people. It was really for me, it was my process, but I'm comfortable being naked with you because you all seem pretty cool. And I believe that this work starts with you. You know, any work that we do in community, we need to go through that process ourselves. We need to unpack. In my case, I've dealt with a lot of blacklistness in my upbringing as someone of mixed race identity. And so I'm really emphasizing the Black body because whiteness is my normative experience growing up. And so, yeah, I was mobilized by a desire to investigate representations of the Black female body in Canada and its links to the history of Saartjie Baartman, or the Hottentot Venus. So just quickly, show of hands if folks have heard of Saartjie Baartman. Okay, sweet. So I'm not going to go too much in detail, but if you want to know kind of the background story, I'll let you know. And I'm sorry I don't have an image of her today. But Saartjie Baartman has been given many names, and one of them is the Black Venus. And she was really like the first entry point within Western art as far as that first introduction to the Black female body, and she was highly objectified, sexualized. Her body was also, what's the word? When she died, they kept parts of her body and kept it on display at the Musée de l'Homme in France. And I was really curious as to how this was still affecting visual culture today, and also how could I create programs to overturn this. I was moved to understand the histories of oppression that exist in Western visual culture as it links to representation, and I was mobilized by the reminder of the systemic, unjust treatment, disregard, and absence of the Black female body in our visual art histories, art education, practices in society. Her story points to the debilitating roots of where internalized racism begins, and a sincere devaluing of our Black communities that continues in North American society today. I wanted to address this issue by looking at my own body, by creating work that responds to the need for more art and education programs that reflect on and reclaim the Black female body as well as diverse bodies. And that programs that in turn inspire a new generation of Black women artists in Canada. So I'm still holding back from going to the next slide. I wonder why. Okay, so as I went through the process of learning of my own Black body from a Canadian mixed racial vantage point, it became clear to me that I was really investigating was the level of self-inquiry required to authentically offer uplifting programs for racialized communities. And I was asking myself the question, how do we directly impact and change dominant visual culture to represent all voices and all bodies? And I was also starting to play with this notion of how do I reclaim the female nude? How do I reclaim my body from a place of joy, from a place of ecstasy? So these were kind of explorations that I was just doing in the studio, jumping, dancing, moving, boobs everywhere, just like going for it. But also as a form of resistance, as a form of responding to a lot of what's going on today. And what is the work we have to do on ourselves as educators, activists, artists, and change makers to facilitate the creation of powerful and lasting programs that really impact communities? And actually, just disrupt something out there. And what does it mean to reclaim? So I use my own body as a site of inquiry, as I said. I was interested in how do I reclaim my own diasporic corporeal existence. I looked at what is the work I need to do on myself. I used a lot of embodiment, artography, autoethnographic, performative inquiry as a way to gain greater understanding of my nude and semi-naked body. And I also looked at these quintessential representations of the Canadian landscape. And have folks heard of the Group of Seven? So that's like, that's the poster child Canada. And a lot of our dominant representations of national identity are devoid of First Nations communities, Black communities, et cetera. And so as I was going through this research and contemplating these ideas, I just decided I would place my body on this Group of Seven painting. And so for me, landscape serves as a metaphor for society, community, our first people, and dominant visual culture. It helped me shake off the rigidity of academia and make the act of researching a joyous, lived experience that was truly transformational. It also helped to bring the few texts I had been able to find on the subject into new meaning as I danced, sculpted, moved, wrote, and painted through the experience. And then this led into a series of different participatory programs that I've created, and also inspired the creation of Black women film. In these programs, the question that I would often ask is, how do you want to be seen and celebrated in the world? And really, I often ask this to almost any group that I work with that goes beyond the Black female communities in Canada. But the first program that I created was Bodyland Identity. And this was a photographic series, video installation, and community empowerment project that investigated representations of the Black female body as a way of kind of like really placing ourselves back onto the land and going into these quintessentially Canadian landscapes. So this is an excerpt from the video installation that I created with one of the groups of women I worked with. It was a national program. And then in turn, we would be invited onto that land by a First Nations elder who was telling us about some of the sacred native plants in the areas we were in. And then through this workshop, through different creative facilitation techniques that I would use, folks would create that image to respond to how do I want to be seen and celebrated in the world. And then I would also create portraits around this theme and this collaborative video installation. And so here are some of the examples. Yes, the group who did winter with me loved me. Don't worry, we kept everyone very warm. And then these are the images that some of the women created along with poetry. And what I found is that the more that we embody these new ways of seeing, these new ways of witnessing each other, because every person was partnered with another individual who would photograph them, so they would work collaboratively on being both photographer and subject. I just found that the more we could embody these truths, the more that we are aware of our value and deserved presence in this world and also on this land. I can't read that right now, but it is a beautiful poem written by Josie Ann that was also just reflecting on body-land connection and identity. And then from there, looking at the blacklessness within filmmaking and the lack of Black voices within the film industry, I created Visualize, which is a Black girls film camp, which has been happening for the last 2 years. And yet again, it was really important that even though it was in the heart of Toronto, that we were still centered on the land, because there's something that happens, I find, in these spaces where we can go deeper. And they were invited the same questions. They created some really exciting short films. One of them won a UNESCO award. They've been shown in different film festivals. And the work was actually incredibly powerful because we created this space that was, really supportive of the Black body and representation. And then finally, Black Women Film Canada launched last year. And we brought, this is just a small set of folks from Toronto, and there's 40 of us. And after we came together, people asked, they were so shocked that there was that many Black women filmmakers in Toronto. And I actually had at least 50 more people who said, why wasn't I invited? And it was actually, this was more of a word of mouth piece of gathering folks together, of celebrating how we can come together to really amplify each other's voices. And so it's a collective and leadership program. So what I found really interesting about doing this nude-based inquiry was the more that I did the work on myself, the more it actually inspired programs that allowed us to go deep and come together in community, but it didn't necessarily have to link to nudity. And then I realized, but I still really wanted to create new images of the nude. There are so few out there. And so here the definition of ecstatic reads, a feeling of expressing overwhelming happiness or joyful excitement, involving an experience of mystic self-transcendence in ecstatic vision. So using a lot of the processes that I had in the community-based programs that I was working in, these women self-selected to be part of a process of creating ecstatic nudes, where this time it wasn't about the process the way my other programs would be, where a lot of social practice art is. This was about, could we create images that were really evocative of these themes, that translated that clearly. And so this is a series that I'm developing right now, and really kind of delving into what is embodied elated resistance. What does it mean to embody Black joy? And we came together. There was lots of music. It was a beautiful summer day. And I had the opportunity to begin to create these images. And I noticed that as we were creating them, Afrofuturist aesthetic is sneaking in there, mysticism. And this is the beginning of a series that I haven't shown yet, I'm talking to you about, but it's sort of like, it's really exciting to see how it's developing and how to invite people to come into their bodies in this way, to be a witness. And then finally I decided to go back to that, that image of me jumping gleefully in a group of 7 painting, and I thought, well, what if I go out into, the landscape again and take landscape photographs and then place these women into those spaces as another way of reflecting on this theme. And also commentary around colonialism and things going on in Canada as well. And so this is just what I'm playing with right now as far as imagery. And giggling is A-okay, because that was the idea, is that these images were created from a place where I really wanted to deviate from just being a photographer, asking folks to show up, take their picture, leave. Like, there's a lot of joy in the process of creating them. And I wanted to make the women larger than life. I was just up in the Canadian Rockies, and those mountains dwarf you. They're huge. And I wanted to really place their bodies and my body into the landscape in a way that that builds on these ideas. And so I'll just end with this little ditty. I am a floating black Venus, weightless, voluptuous, and strong. I accept my body, I celebrate it, I revel in it. I am performing a radical act. I show up completely in my beautiful brown skin and love it up. I will show it off in joy-filled retaliation. I dance, fly, jump, so that my breasts bounce with abandon. I bow forward in gratitude, feeling my delicious belly and hips as my bosom touch my thighs. I am healthy, alive, and sacred. My kinky hair is set free and I laugh with abandon. This brown body is a vessel for all that I am and where I came from. I will love this body with pride and in solidarity, in unabashed black joy for every woman who came before me and stands in front of me now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. We haven't met yet because I think you're just off the plane, but hi, I'm Nisa. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. Thank you to our presenters. This was so extraordinary. Let's a round of applause for our presenters, please. This was really wonderful. I got to know more about all of your practices.